Welcome out to another episode of It's All Been Checked Before. This time, Time Zero Part 2, but it's the first of the latest season we're doing. Time Zero Part 2. It's All Been Checked Before. Speaking of Trek, if you know the mothership, It's All Been Done Radio Hour, this weekend, the 100th episode of Universe Journey. And you're going to, if you're a fan of this show, you're going to definitely be a fan. You're a fan of Universe Journey. You're a fan of that. And if you're not, you're going to be. Go listen. Go back and listen. Start at episode 1 and catch up. But this Saturday, November 12th, even if you haven't listened to the other ones, you're going to get it. You're going to enjoy it. 100th episode of Universe Journey, live, Boxland Media. Go to iabdpresents.com. Get those tickets. And now, you got your ticket for this. You're here. Time Zero Part 2 on It's All Been Checked Before.
Welcome out to another episode of It's All Been Trekked Before. Regular hosts are here.
This is Steven.
Jimmy-Jerome. Keith, still remarkably weeks later, is in his multiverse of madness.
We're hoping he comes back. I see him all the time on the ship. I think it's him, but it's not. And
we only mentioned in our private chat that we were recording this like 6 times this week. And he still forgot double booked. So hopefully we'll get him, we'll get his thoughts on this episode next week. Or when we record in about 36 hours.
Yeah.
But we're here to talk about Time Zero Part 2, a cliffhanger that I was not nearly as interested in as the last 2 cliffhangers we've had. What were your first impressions of the episode?
That was mine as well. And, we do pull back the curtain a lot here. Yeah, I felt like this was our longest. We took a long break between recording our own episodes. And I feel like the other times we had taken breaks, but maybe not this long. Or if we did, maybe it was because, like you said, those were better. Like Best of Both Worlds Part 1. At the end of that, I was like, when's Part 2 coming? It was there. This one, I was like, Time Zero Part 2? Are we start? This is a new season. Yeah. And then once they did the previously on Star Trek The Next Generation or whatever, I was like, oh yeah, that's right. And I felt the same way watching those as I did about this episode, I guess, collectively both hours. And I found a review, actually, a Star Trek site review that was very similar, which was what was actually going on in the episode was just okay. Like the thing with the aliens and all that. But the time travel stuff was decent. The Guinan Picard stuff, fantastic as always. And the cast, whenever the cast gets dressed up in different duds and aren't their uniforms, it's amazing. And because I started with, that was my first fashion note, was Gates looks great in the old duds. And I was like, wait a minute, they all do. And I guess when you put good looking people in nice clothes, they're always going to look surprised. They're always going to look good. Even if, I guess if they put them in rags, some of them would probably still look good. But so, I guess that's an obvious thing. So there was still some fun to that to me, but those are the most fun things. But the story itself overall, I just thought it was okay.
I agree with you about the costumes. Geordie's glasses were my other fashion note. I appreciate. I like that. And multiple times we saw him take off the white contacts just to put them on. Why didn't he just not leave them on? That would have been easier for everybody involved. Right. But yeah, I did not care for this one. Maybe you can convince me. You mentioned some things that you liked, and you're right. The Picard Guinan stuff was. That's
it. Guinan, Picard, and the clothes. I think that's mostly it.
Those are strong elements, but it has an 8.2 out of 10 rating on IMDb.
I was surprised that it's
rated very highly. I don't know why.
I don't either.
I did not feel like this was very good, but let's talk about the details and then maybe we'll find out. It was directed by one of our regulars, Les Landau. A story by Joe Menosky, who we've talked about before, and teleplay by Jerry Taylor, who we've talked about quite a bit before.
Right. Yeah.
I'm sure Jerry Taylor is what gave that Picard Guinan the oomph of their relationship, because she's good at that. But
yeah, I enjoyed that. And, the thing they kept talking about, I'll remember you, you won't remember me, kind of a thing or whatever. But
and I'll just mention right now, because this was a big debate on people watching Star Trek Picard season 2 recently, is Picard goes back in time to 2024 and he's talking to Guinan, and they're like, how come she doesn't remember him from Time Zero? But there is an explanation that has to do with Picard, not this. That the timeline's already screwed up to the point where, because the timeline screwed up in 2024, the version of him in the 24th century that went back never existed. So he would have never gone back to meet her. Hence, he did not meet her in the 1800s. So in that alternate timeline,
that's why. Okay.
Because he went back in time to fix the screwed up timeline, and because of the screwed timeline, he wouldn't have gone back in time. Yeah.
Gotcha.
So that's the explanation there for those people that are nitpicking Picard season 2 on why Guinan's meeting him for the first time 100 years after this.
That makes sense. Somebody says, and I can't remember, it says it goes far beyond friendship for those two. And we're like, yeah, we've been talking about this for how many years already? Yeah,
I wrote that down too. It looked like they were going to kiss for a minute there.
Yeah.
I mean, I was always a Picard Crusher shipper, but like I said, I hadn't seen a lot of these episodes, especially the later ones. Now I'm starting to turn into a Picard Guinan shipper.
Yeah. I mean, we know Guinan and Riker got it on a lot.
Yes, definitely.
For sure. But
I mean, I feel like in Star Trek Picard, not to get too far ahead of ourselves, but it seems very platonic between the two of them, even though they're very, very close. And maybe they made that decision because they never went there with them in the movies or anything. But I don't know. I feel like they were setting up that there was a romance or something here, and they never followed up on it. And that's to everybody's disappointment and detriment, because I'm all for that. All for it.
Yeah.
But we know Guinan's had a bunch of husbands, so maybe she values a good friend more than a husband at this point in her life in the 24th century. At the beginning of the episode, there was a previously on that was almost 2 minutes long, which seems excessive by today's standards. Then the theme song is 2 minutes long, so you're 4 minutes before you get into the episode.
Well, and I think it's that thing. Well, and I guess broadcast television still has gaps like this, but back then I feel like it was probably like, there's a lot to get into with this, and you haven't seen this in 3 months, so here you go. And I was thankful. I was thankful for the 2 minutes because I needed that recap. But
I guess I don't feel like I needed it, not because I remembered it super well, but because I didn't care.
Yeah. I think that also explains why I was like, Times Arrow. What? I vaguely recall part 1. Oh, that's what it was. Okay, now I remember. And I'm very curious. I feel like I probably didn't love that one either, but I feel like I felt nicer about part 1 than part 2, which I guess we always do with these. But I'm curious when we release the podcast if I'm like, yeah, I can't wait for part 2, or if I'm like, whatever. When it gets here, it gets here. Because I can't remember what I thought about it.
I think my recollection is I was kind of interested and excited for part 2 because the whole crew was coming back. And I was like, back in time. And I was like, this is going to pick up the story because they're all going to meet up with Dana and Guinan. And then it didn't pick up the story.
It did make it more interesting, but the review I cited earlier, which I should give credit to the website while we're here. Jammersreviews.com. That's where it came from. But anyway, he mentioned the whole ruse about not paying the rent. No, we're traveling theatrical tour or whatever. It was fun, but it still also felt like 4 minutes that we did not need. Like, is that necessary?
So we ranked part 1 number 17 out of 26 for the season.
Okay.
Just so you know. Right. So we were not like all on the high horse about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, the main thrust of this we're introduced to in this episode is Mark Twain is going to get evidence of the time travelers and expose them. That is his main point. Man, he was so much more central and annoying than he was in the first episode.
Oh, man.
I hate to knock Jerry Hardin. It just, I loved him in small doses in part 1. We got so much of him in part 2, I really got tired of him.
Yeah, it was tough. I mean, it was tough in part 1, but part 2 was really tough.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was just, slow it down.
Yeah, I didn't mind him in part 1, but we didn't get that much of him. So where Jack London, who we got a ton of in part 1, was barely in part 2, just like Mark Twain saying, hey, write about what you know, go to Alaskan experience, and then he's gone.
So I looked that up too. I'm like, did they actually meet? I didn't do a deep dive, but from what I understand, they never actually met, but they did admire, and they may have had correspondence, I think, about each other's writing. I think Twain liked London's writing and vice versa. Yeah, they got rid of it real fast.
So after the Mark Twain story, and I feel like part 2 was lesser for it. Switching out London for Twain was a bad idea. Getting into the story, we drop into Crusher and Riker, and they're already mid-story. And it's like, how did they get costumes? How did they get the room? They didn't have to pay anything up front. They're just an acting troupe squatting in poor Mrs. Carmichael's lodgings.
Right.
I feel like we missed a few steps here of where they got all dressed up and everything. I don't know.
Like, was something filmed or not? Or they were just, and that was kind of the angle that, again, jammersreviews.com, jammer at jammersreviews.com. It's funny, they were trying to cram a lot in, but none of it was interesting. It was he kind of went that way. I'm kind of going further that way in the sense that, like I said, did we need 4 minutes on that? And if you're going to do 4 minutes, like if the whole episode was them putting on a show back then or whatever, or in the holodeck or whatever, maybe I'm interested because we've done those before.
Well, you notice that when it came time to actually act, he immediately says, Dana, Crusher, go, because they're the actual actors. Right. I appreciated that consistency in storytelling. Honestly.
Yeah. And to your point at the end of the first episode, it's like, oh, it's great. The whole crew's going back. And I guess it would have been more interesting.
Except for
if you see more of them doing stuff in town, then we're into a voyage home kind of situation where it's like, oh, they're all trying to fit in this old world or whatever.
They're like, let's do the voyage home thing, except without all the good parts that made voyage home work.
Yeah. The aliens weren't that interesting. They're dispatched very quickly. Crusher at the hospital trying to help them is like, okay, that's cool, and she's doing that stuff, but there's nothing especially interesting there either.
She's treating a patient in the hospital who I swear looks like Javier Bardem.
Ha!
But it was actually played by Bill Cho Lee, best known for this role of a few others.
Good on
So, yeah, not a 12 credits, bunch of guest star stuff. Crusher's all alone. And I was actually scared for her for a minute there when the alarm goes off and she's by herself and everything. They ended up not doing anything exciting with it. But for a minute, I was like, oh, no. But then when they had the confrontation with the police officer, who was played by William Boyett, and I mentioned that because he has a ton of credits. He's known for When a Stranger Calls, Newsies, Turner and Hooch, The Rocketeer, and he appeared in a previous Next Gen episode, The Big Goodbye, as Lieutenant Dan Bell. So he was in two of them. But when he comes in and they're fighting, Geordi punches somebody out and then Riker uses the phaser. I'm like, shouldn't that be LeVar Burton's like, we are 6 seasons in, I've never got to punch anybody out. It's my turn.
Is that the scene where Data drives the
after they escape, yes, which seemed way too easy. Then Riker right before that gives a flat-handed like punch. Not a slap or a nose up, just like
it was weird, And
Riker,
the stunt double for Brent Spiner was TOS level because it's like that is not. Well, I guess he's not. I guess he is a stunt driver, or he's a guy who knows how to drive a carriage of horses, but which makes sense. It's not Brent Spiner, but they did pale him out and everything. But I'm like, that's not Brent Spiner.
Yeah, that was way too convenient that they're looking for him, even though he's right there.
Right.
And then he shows up and rescues them. It just did not make sense to me. Like at this point, he didn't even know they were back in time, right? So how did he know to come rescue them?
Right.
The snake lightning cane effect was pretty cool.
Yeah.
When they made it come to life.
Mm-hmm.
Geordi holding the book upside down and Troy having to flip it over for him. I know that's corny, but that's like one of the Star Trek 4 level jokes that actually made it in.
Yeah, and I wish they'd gone more, and maybe we said this in part 1, I wish they'd gone more into the fish out of water thing, even though, I mean, fish out of water is done all the time, but if you're going to do it, this is a place to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's and it actually, oddly enough, it also felt like a TOS episode in that it felt like it took place in like 3 city blocks, because obviously it was on a soundstage.
Yeah, San Francisco is really big. It certainly seemed like they were all on the same block, but I guess they could have been in a totally different part of San Francisco.
Even back then, San Francisco was pretty good size.
Pretty big. Yeah, that did not come across, but I guess that's a limitation of what they were doing.
Sure.
So then Picard charms the pants off of, I mean, really, if this was Kirk, he would have slept with her. Mrs. Carmichael, played by Pamela Kosh. She's got 48 credits. She did an arc on the King of Queens. She's was in ER, Monk, Desperate Housewives, Gilmore Girls. Yeah. She looked so familiar to me. As far as Star Trek credits go, she is in the series finale of Next Gen as well as a different character. Wow. I mean, it would be funny if Picard ended up with Mrs. Carmichael in the series finale, but now it's a different character. It just seemed way too ridiculous and easy. I would have, I don't know. wanted something more there. So after they run from the policeman, who the whole problem is Riker's wearing the police uniform and he doesn't recognize him. Riker keeps the uniform. He doesn't change clothes. Like, was it hard to get that uniform? Okay, and for a second I wondered, did they replicate these uniforms before they came back in time?
Right.
Did they? I don't remember.
I don't remember seeing it either.
I can't remember when they came back in time if they were in uniforms or not.
Because
if they were, we're owed some explanation. If they weren't, it's just my faulty memory.
Was the idea that Riker would dress up as a policeman so he could find out more information?
I guess, but he's running around with a bunch of civilians because they're not all police, which doesn't really make sense. It's like, you dress as a policeman, you dress as a nurse, you dress as, I don't know what Picard was, a street performer.
Right.
You know, this is a ragtag. This isn't the Village people walked around in a group in costume.
Although Riker's mustache is very the cop in Village people. So
right, but if your ear gets caught in the uniform, change clothes.
Right.
They open up the hole, and everybody jumps back in time. And Twain's like, "I'm going too," and he telegraphs it, and Picard just sits there and watches him.
Yeah,
it's like, why? That made no sense to me. I know he's concerned about Guinan, but I would think grab him. Also, Picard sends his entire crew through the gap. He doesn't keep anybody back to help him.
I wrote that too. He says, "Follow him." I'm like, is that the best idea? To just randomly jump into a portal? I don't think it is.
And then Troy, delightfully apparently says, "I'll handle Twain," and just talks like, "Oh, I'm so charmed by this guy. I'm not. No. I don't know how you are. I don't understand." And then Twain's like, "I don't believe any of this good stuff is true because the world sucks." And Troy's like, "No, it's all true." He's like, "Oh, well, I was wrong." And I'm like, wait, well, you're not going to show him proof? He just all of a sudden was like, "No, I guess it's better now," after he complains.
He complains about they don't let a man open the door for ladies. It's like they're all automatic. Nobody's opening doors for anybody, buddy. But I guess maybe an automatic door would be a tough concept for somebody from the 1800s. But
so Riker goes to 10 forward and confronts Guinan in the 24th century. Yeah. And she's like, "I can't tell you anything." And he's like, "Well, just tell me how we get him home." "No, I can't tell you anything." Based on how they get him home, why would it matter if she told him?
That part of a lot of time travel things I never understand.
I get if she doesn't want to mess something up, but there wasn't anything to mess up here.
Right. Well, does that... Oh, no. Data is the one who figures out, well, we'll just hit him with photon torpedoes instead of a regular attack.
Yeah. All she had to say is, "Hey, I remember I guess she was unconscious and whatever, so maybe she didn't actually know because she was badly injured and maybe her memories are fuzzy about it. But she could have just said that, "Hey, I was knocked for a loop here, so my memory is not great. Sorry." She was unnecessarily mysterious. And I love Guinan mysterious, but it was stupid.
Yes, it was.
Worf convinces Riker that they should destroy this and put that ahead of saving Picard. I guess it makes sense because the lizard people are apparently constantly killing people, even though we don't see them kill anybody in the second episode. It sure seems like they're going slow.
They're sucking out people's, not their soul, but their life energy, right? Is that
same thing?
Yeah.
So Riker's like, "Prepare to fire," and Worf's like, "It'll be 1 minute till the torpedoes are ready." And I'm like, if every time they went into battle it took 1 minute.
Yeah.
It is just in time for Data to wake up.
What did not make sense in the torpedo room that they're not always ready?
It did not make sense to me.
Yeah. There were a lot of false constructs in this episode.
Yes.
I guess the previous one too. They mentioned that they eliminated poverty on Earth. Do you think they eliminated that first and then the common cold, or the common cold and then poverty?
Clearly poverty first, because the common cold they're still fighting in the 24th. Everyone, well, it's inconsistent, right? Yeah. They said they can't cure it, and then we saw them cure it or something.
I have a feeling that people still get sick in that century, but they're like, "Oh, that can't be the common cold. We cured it," and they just give it a different name. "Oh, you have this." Well, it feels like a common cold. It has very similar symptoms, but that's not what you have. We cured that. Galaxy-wide.
Mark Twain offers to do the rescue. Or sorry, he keeps calling himself Samuel Clemens, but you know who I'm talking. I'm calling him Twain. He offers to do the rescue, and Riker's like, okay, fine, I'll trust you without any type of plan or anything. Because then he comes back, he's like, oh, I got put in the middle of town. I had to run all this way. And they're like, we don't have any way to know if he succeeded or not. It's so stupid.
It didn't make sense. It was very much, I don't know if you remember the Scooby-Doo episodes where they always had a guest star. The later ones. That's what this is like. It's like the Star Trek crew meets Mark Twain. Dun, dun, dun. And so, yeah. And it makes sense because I guess guest stars are guest stars, but they were always, it's a cartoon. They're over the top. But this guy, and actually jammersreviews.com, Jammer also said it's very cartoonish or caricature of Mark Twain as far as we know. But Hal Holbrook obviously was not available to play Mark Twain.
I wonder if the writers saw part one. They went on hiatus for the summer. Said he had a small part. We enjoyed him. Somebody thought he was brilliant and wanted to feature him. And they sacrificed the story making sense. They could have more Mark Twain.
I'm looking at that from a modern perspective where it would have been like, oh, we're just going to film both these episodes at once, but we're going to split them up.
No, they wouldn't have filmed these at once. There would have been months in between.
Yeah. Well, and that's my final note, my final fashion note. Marina Sirtis got a nice tan over the summer. There's one of the outfits she's wearing. It's like, and it's not consistent with the rest of the episode, but it's like, oh, she got a tan this summer. She got some sun. And I mean, obviously, everything looks good on her, but it looked great on her. Yeah, so you could see that there was a break. It proves that out. But yeah, I think you're right about the Mark Twain theory. Mark Twain theory is a good one. This was a lot of fun. Let's give him more. It's like, nope, you already had too much.
Yeah. But I didn't think they had too much in part one. I think they had the right amount in part one.
Fair.
Instead of thanking Twain when Twain shows up, Picard gives him chores. He's like, make sure Guinan's okay, which that one I get. And also, Mrs. Carmichael needs paid. Will you go?
That actually made me laugh. That part actually made me laugh.
But again, because so little we get to see her, it just didn't fit.
Does it really matter if she gets paid?
Yeah. So, Steven, I just looked at our rankings from last year, and you did rank Samuel Clemens as your annoyance of part one. Okay. I did not, and neither did Keith. So he obviously bothered you a lot more than us. And okay. I wanted to have a drink with him, so we definitely had differing opinions.
Well, I will jump ahead. Spoiler alert. I found him the most annoying this time, but I still also want to have a drink with him. Because I forgot, I think I forgot last episode what a great writer he obviously was. So I wouldn't mind discussing some of those things. And some of his
I still have more notes, but since you said it, I'll go ahead and fill these out. He was also my annoyance. I mean, I don't know how anybody chooses anyone else other than him, other than maybe Riker for not changing out of the police uniform after he was already caught. But my have a drink with is Mrs. Carmichael because I was really tickled by her. Yeah. I enjoyed her a lot. Maybe
Riker met a lady in that era who really liked him in that getup, and he didn't want to ruin that opportunity.
Or Troy made a comment of, you look really handsome in that.
Yeah, I like that mustache and everything. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, Carmichael, I don't know why I want to have a drink with her because she was – the thing about – she seemed familiar to me, but the thing is they did not treat her character well, but I thought she acted it very well in the small bit she got. Yeah. I was very pleased with her performance, and I wanted more of her. I mean, really, we could have done, if we focused on the fish out of water, we could have done a whole zany running bits with her.
Totally. Yeah. That would have been a lot more fun and more interesting. And I guess that explains why Picard is like, make sure she gets paid because he doesn't want to cheat somebody out of their rent money. But it is funny for him to be like, please take care of that. Yeah.
I mean, that's going to be my alternate episode. Is a good version of this that was more Star Trek 4 and had a lot more Mrs. Carmichael and less Samuel Clemens.
That's good. Mine is very different. My alternate episode is they go back in time, obviously not to the 1800s. So they go back to the late 20th century, and they meet Harlan Ellison. So it's a very different episode.
And he's complaining about Gene Roddenberry screwing up a script.
Yeah.
That would be fun. I would enjoy that.
I think that's I mean, I think obviously Mark Twain's a great writer. So Harlan Ellison.
The actress that played Mrs. Carmichael was in an episode of Pushing Daisies as curator. I probably remember her from that episode, even though I don't remember the episode right now because she just seems so familiar. Anyway,
she's still with us.
There's no death date on her. Right. She was born in 1930, so she'd be 92. She is from England, unsurprisingly, from Kent.
Oh, yeah.
So I told you Picard gives Twain chores. Twain gives Picard a chore to read my book. Read my books, because apparently Picard's never read Mark Twain, which was interesting. And I really thought we'd get a final shot of the series of Picard or the episode of Picard in his ready room reading a Twain book, but they didn't do it. So shows what I know. Instead, we get that final shot of Twain leaving his watch and leaving the data head in the cavern, which was beyond corny.
Yeah.
And then the whole rescue with Picard appearing just after they fired and they still had time to beam him. It seemed cutting it way too close. And again, just did not make sense to me.
No.
I didn't buy it.
No.
We've talked about it. I'm not feeling any better about the episode. Are you?
Nope. Me either.
That being said, I think it was the best episode this season so far.
It is. Regrettably, it is.
I think it will not hold that ranking long at all.
I will pull the curtain back once again, and this is one of those that I watched like at 10:30. I think I started like 10:30 last night, or it was late, and I was already tired, so I got sleepy. So I kept rewinding, and then whenever I watch a late one and I feel like I missed something. I'm like, did I miss something? So I go and read the summary and everything, and I'm like, nope, I didn't. I remember all of this. I didn't miss anything, and I was still underwhelmed. So yeah.
Yeah, I have a feeling it's going to get knocked down the top spot next week as we watch Realm of Fear. Overcoming his fear of Transporter, Lieutenant Barclay joins an away team only to find something in the beam with him.
Oh, okay. Barclay. I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to Keith coming in and saying he really liked this part 2. Sorry, not this happy episode.
Hopefully we'll catch up with Keith's thoughts before we start talking Realm of Fear. As I indicated, I have already watched it. I just watched it last night, so it's fresh in my mind. We're recording like 36 hours. I'm sure I'll still remember it well enough. I wasn't drinking when I watched it, so clear head. I'm
going to say in this part of the multiverse, we probably both should. So when Keith passes through this one, we're here, ready to go.
And then we just stay on and record the other 2.
Yeah.
So we don't have to do Sunday morning.
I hope in that multiverse he's watched everything. He's watched all. Yeah.
Well, until then, live long.
Like Guinan.
She lived a long time.
I feel like Twain had a pretty good run, too. Maybe I'm wrong.
Yeah, he did.
He was into his 80s, maybe? Which was really long for them. I could be wrong.
He was 74 when he died, but for 1910, that was pretty long-lived.
That's very old.
Yeah.
Either way, he had a good run, too. Read his books and prosper.
It's All Been Done presents
Who's Got the Time?